I am. Hello and welcome to James Gillespie's High School Parent Council meeting. I'm Sarah Scott and I'm the Chair of the Parent Council. Thank you for joining us this evening. Can I apologise in advance for any technical issues we might have during the meeting? For example, if you're having problems joining us or hearing us, or if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your patience. As always, the only people who can be heard are the presenters, and everyone else attending can write questions via the Q&A panel that can't be heard. Before we start, I'd like to go through a few brief housekeeping points. We're aiming for the meeting to last about 1 hour, though we may possibly overrun that a little. The meeting is being recorded and it will be put online for those who can't make it this evening, so please don't share any personal information that shouldn't be aired publicly. As I've said, we can only take questions via the Q&A panel. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderators, so if you would like your question to say private, please say so when you type it in. And can I ask that if you see a question on the Q&A panel that is similar to one that you want to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat? That will hopefully let us get through more questions and let our presenters concentrate on the most popular ones. Can I also say that all questions and comments are can I also ask that all questions and comments are expressed in an appropriately courteous way? The questions published will be gathered up at the end and posted together with answers on the Parent Council website. We rely on the school to put together answers, which often involves a lot of time and several different members of staff. You will understand that given the pressures that the school is under at the moment, this can take a little while. So if you do have any urgent issues or queries, please do get in touch directly with the school or with the Parent Council. As is the normal format, you will hear various updates and presentations, and questions will follow at the end. This evening, as always, we will hear from our head teacher, Donald MacDonald, who is also accompanied by two of his deputy head teachers this evening, Bob Shankland, who will be speaking about the assessments under the SQA's alternative certification model, and Jeff Warden to speak about the new timetable which starts next week. We're also very happy to be joined by Elliot Ambrose, who is the Active Schools Coordinator for the school and will give an update on plans for Active Schools for 2021-22. As was announced in last month's meeting, the delivery of active schools at the school has had to be reviewed because of an unexpected change in council policy about where resources were to be focused, and also because of a change in Sports Scotland rules, which means that charges can't be made for participation in clubs. This is a really essential part of school life and will be all the more important in the coming year when we hope to be entering a recovery phase after all that has happened over the last year or so. In difficult circumstances, it has been possible to put together an abbreviated programme for S1 to 3s to run to the end of term, and I'm happy to say that Elliot at the school and Parent Council member Lisa Sutherland have worked together to put together a plan for delivering a full Active Schools programme in the coming year. This is particularly welcome because I know that this issue is causing problems for schools across Edinburgh, and it is really important to have a plan in place before the summer. And Elliot and Donald will have more to say about this later. Before handing over to Donald for his report, I just wanted to say a few words about Parent Council activities. This is the last Parent Council meeting in the 2020-21 school year. It has been a long and difficult year for the whole school community, for staff and for children and for parents. During this time, the Parent Council has tried hard to keep up a regular schedule of meetings to allow parents to stay in touch with the school and the school to communicate with parents. At this point, we don't know what will and will not be permitted in terms of in-person meetings after the summer, but the Parent Council is currently thinking about the best way of keeping meetings going in the next school year. Online meetings have a lot of advantages. We have higher numbers of people attending, and they're much more convenient for parents and staff in many ways. But at the same time, they are less interactive than face-to-face meetings, and perhaps we will welcome seeing people in real life when we're allowed to do that again. If you have any suggestions or views about the format of meetings, please do let us know via the chat during the meeting or email the Parent Council direct. Whatever happens next year, I would like to take the opportunity tonight to thank the people behind the scenes who you don't see, but who have been keeping these meetings on the road over the last year. That's Ailsa McIntosh, Kath Downey and particularly Graham Davis of the Parent Council. Without them, there wouldn't be any meetings at all, so thank you to them. Just turning briefly to Parent Council finances, as I've mentioned in the past, fundraising by the Parent Council is down this year in comparison with previous years for understandable reasons. There have been comparatively few calls on our funds for this year as school activities have not been taking place. However, as we come into this new school year, we hope you will bear in mind the support which the Parent Council funds provide to the school and consider if you're able to support it. There is more information on fundraising via Easy Fundraising and donation through Parent Pay on our website, jgspc.wordpress.com. And finally, I have reported before on the concerns raised by parent councils, including ours, in Edinburgh in regular meetings with the council about the SQA's alternative certification model. You will hear more about this from Bob Shanklin about the progress of the assessments at Gillespie's, but no doubt you'll all be aware that schools and young people across Scotland have been raising their own concerns right up to Scottish Parliament level about how the model is actually functioning in practice. Staff at James Gillespie's have been working very hard to deal with all the challenges. As we come to the end of the school year, and with this issue likely to extend into the summer, the Parent Council will continue to monitor the situation and raise concerns where necessary. So thank you for listening to that summary, and I will hand over now to Donald for his report. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for setting the tone and the structure for the evening. So this then is our last Parent Council meeting of this session. I just want to take the opportunity of thanking everyone across the school community for your support in what has been a quite extraordinary year. It's been like no other in my almost 40 years of being in teaching and being in education. And without your support and your understanding, we wouldn't have been as successful, and things wouldn't have run as smoothly as they have been. There have been challenges, there have been aspects of the arrangements that I wish could have been different. But we are where we are. We keep on learning, reflecting, reviewing, and to that end, thank you to everyone who has taken the time and trouble to thank us when we get things right and to suggest alternatives when we get things wrong in your eyes. We know that in the unprecedented situation that we were in, it's impossible to please everyone. But genuinely, we've made decisions, often quite hurriedly, often responding very quickly, but always with the best of intentions, and always with the interests of the youngsters at heart. And I hope that where we've had sometimes disagreements about how we do things, that people have understood perhaps why we've arrived at the decisions that we have done so. Before I just go into my formal report, can I just mention that tomorrow is a holiday. I think this is the first time in my teaching career that we've had a holiday midweek. And it's just something that I'm hoping that people know that, so we don't have youngsters turning up at school tomorrow. So as last time then, can I begin just with an update on COVID and the various mitigations that we have. We had a further positive COVID case earlier this week, yesterday. We've become quite efficient in practice now in our communications around that, and we've become, I think, quite efficient at quickly identifying those who are close contacts, informing their families and getting the youngsters home to self-isolate as quickly as possible. Yesterday, by way of example, there were 12 identified as close contacts. The pupil identified yesterday in S3 was our 8th pupil who has been positive whilst on the school campus. So given that we've been operational now with the threat of COVID for around 15 months, I take some satisfaction from the mitigations that we have in place. We were the first school in the UK to introduce masks around the school building, and the primary driver behind that was the pupils themselves, the pupil voice. And I think we got it right. We took a risk at the time. We did agree to do that as a school prior to the World Health Organization, recommending that it was done in schools. But I think it illustrates the importance of taking decisions locally and responding to young people. Various other mitigations, hands, face, we take opportunity to remind our youngsters and our staff regularly. I would comment that perhaps in the last week or 2 or 3 we've become a little bit complacent, and so we just remind people. And in a context of increasing COVID numbers in Edinburgh, we know that's the case, that we need to be increasingly vigilant in the next 3 weeks. So please, let's all continue to be vigilant in that area. I just mentioned lateral flow tests. All pupils in the school are invited to participate in that. and we will issue further details around whether there's an expectation that these are undertaken during the holidays. I'll say something about that in the next week or two, because given the rapidly evolving, changing circumstances, the advice around these will no doubt evolve. We don't know what's going to be happening in August yet, and I anticipate communicating with you probably towards the end of the first week in August. People start back, I think it's the 16th of August, so I anticipate sharing information with you around the 10th of August. Now, colleagues here this evening, Bob Shanklin will talk about SQA exams, just an update, and indeed those of you tuned into the 6 o'clock news tonight will know that the new Education Minister was speaking about SQA exams, etc. then, so information is coming at us quickly, often, and we're responding to that very often after it has been filtered and adapted for the 23 state schools in Edinburgh by the local council. So we're in a rapidly changing and fast changing situation. Jeff Warden will say something about the timetable arrangements for next week, and Elliot Ambrose will talk about active schools. So I will go into any of these areas in my overview just now. At the previous Parent Council meeting, we spoke about S6 and what we might do to mark their leaving. Now, 2 weeks ago, it was determined that we would have the S6 coming into school, and there would be some opportunity to say farewell, to share slides, share memories, and so on and so forth. That is looking increasingly unlikely. The information I have today is that the number of positive COVID cases has quadrupled in the last 2 weeks in Edinburgh. So I think, therefore, I want to put an alert that it's unlikely we're going to be able to get the S6 in for any kind of gathering. I think it might be seen as being a bit reckless to do that. So sincere apologies. We are intending to have the S6 prom, which would mark the end of their 6 years at high school, but also, of course, the end of their 13 years in formal education since they began in P1, and some earlier, of course, in nursery. Elliot will talk about extracurricular activities that I've mentioned. School roll is never far from my thinking as we plan for the future. The current intake for the P7 into S1 is just shy of 320. And that presents, as I mentioned before, challenges, but also opportunities. And as Jeff Warden will talk in a moment about, over the years, we do develop and expand our curriculum. And when we bring new staff in, that gives us the opportunity to bring in new subjects. We do that in response to levels of interest among our pupils. So additional staff certainly brings its opportunities. In terms of staffing for the coming year, the increased role allows us to appoint up to 8 additional staff. In addition to that, we have staff on maternity leave. We have staff who moved on to promoted positions. We have staff who are retiring. And what I intend to do, rather than go into those details tonight, is I'll share that with a summary with all members of the school community before we break up on the 25th of June. There are a good number of them. Some staff who have been with us for over 30 years, and other staff who have been with us for less than a year. But I'd want to acknowledge and pay tribute to all of them, and I'll do that as an addition to my Friday update in the next couple of weeks. I'd rather leave more time for questions this evening, so I'm going to stop or conclude there. And at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Bob Shanklin, who will take us through a summary of what's happening on SQA-related matters. So over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Donald, and good evening, everyone. I have to make an apology, first of all. I do appear to be losing my voice currently, so I may be more difficult to understand tonight than normal, which many people may find surprising, but it is true. But the plus point is I'm going to try and be more succinct. So I will just get cracking with a little presentation, which I'll share just now, and then try and get through the information as quickly as I can. As seems to be the theme with SQA updates, I do have quite a lot of information to get through. Always they are rapidly changing scene is SQA. So just a wee bit of a quick update on where we are currently. with SQA Business, you will be no doubt very aware of the fact that we've been completing evidence gathering assessments in the school since the 10th of May, and as of tomorrow should be completely finished with all written and practical assessments. So all that is left now to be completed tomorrow is a couple of classes worth of modern language speaking assessments, and that indeed will be the whole schedule of assessments done. It's been obviously a tough and very busy time for us in the school, and of course not to mention a very tough and grueling schedule for all our students who are having to sit these assessments. But on the most part, I have to say that all the students in the school have really conducted themselves excellently, as they do every year, and have really given their all to doing the best that they can in the assessments. Obviously, these assessments are absolutely vital in gathering evidence that is required for teachers to be able to make their provisional course award judgments, which is a very important part of the SQA's alternative certification model for this year. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit of an overview as what is happening basically between now and the end of term. So obviously, as assessments are being completed, school teaching staff are obviously marking a lot of the assessments that have been done. A lot of that is well underway, especially for those lucky members of staff that had assessments at the start of the assessment schedule. But as well as marking, all of our faculties and departments have to undergo very, very strict and very rigorous quality assurance and moderation activities to make sure that the marks that are generated are in line with the SQA's expectations and with their national standard. And as you'll see from our presentation, there's a number of different techniques that they'll employ, or have already employed or will be employing over the next couple of weeks, to make sure that those marks that are generated for the students are to that national standard. Obviously, work around a plan for quality assurance has been in the making for quite some time, and faculties have very clear plans with clear roles and responsibilities for everyone that's involved in that. SQA have also provided lots of learning materials for staff to make sure that they are marking to that standard that would normally only be the opportunity to mark would normally only be afforded to specific SQA appointees. But of course now all teachers across the whole nation are having to mark candidate scripts. And as well as obviously our own quality assurance and moderation processes, the City of Edinburgh Council have also been pretty heavily involved in working with schools and working with faculties and departments to make sure that the quality assurance and moderation process is the best it possibly can be. In Edinburgh, we have what's called a lead teacher network, where we have a lead teacher who's identified for every course that is offered in schools, and throughout the year they have been organising events and overseeing the development of quality assurance and moderation plans in schools. And indeed, in many subjects, and especially those where there's maybe not a great number of teachers in the school, or maybe not a huge amount of candidates in each course, there is moderation which is happening between schools. Actually, not just for small courses, that's for a lot of different courses, where they are sampling and moderating papers from other schools as well, to make sure that not only do we have consistency of marking within an institution, but we have that across the city. And we're very lucky in Gillespie with the great standard of teaching staff that we have, that a number of our CLs and teachers are actually the City Edinburgh Council's designated lead teachers. Once obviously all the marking is completed, then the moderation and quality assurance processes are finished. Eventually, staff will be able to arrive at what the SQA are calling a provisional course award for all candidates, and that would be looking across all significant pieces of evidence which have been generated throughout the year. Although, as I've said in previous correspondence and as I'd written earlier on in this presentation, a lot of that evidence for us at Gillespie will have been generated in this assessment window, predominantly in May. It's then down to the faculties to analyse the data that they have come up with, or that the candidates have produced through their work. Ultimately, that will take the form of grades, and initially what departments are doing is looking at, first broadly, if the grades generated by the students meet the expectations that we have of the cohort as a whole, and obviously that the individual grades that students attain are in line with our expectations of how that candidate was progressing. Part of this process is also about considering the approaches taken to evidence collection, so actually looking at the paper, looking at the mode at which that paper was delivered, and analysing candidate performance across that to see if there might be areas, for example, where candidates have not performed particularly well in maybe, let's say, a specific area of the course that may have been delivered through a period of remote learning, and then to potentially consider mitigations to sort that difficulty or that problem. And part of the process that the SQA are asking schools to do is to sometimes have a look at the grade boundary, and to see if the grade boundary may need to be moved, taking into account all the different bits of information that we have. Another really important process of determining provisional course awards is also looking at the performance of candidates this year and seeing how that fares to performance of candidates doing the same course in previous years. And the hope is really from the SQA, and I would say from us and from the local authority, is that through the various mitigations that we can make, and have already made to the assessments, that candidate performance on a cohort level would broadly be in line with what we've seen in previous years. You'll notice, if reading through my notes there, that I'm talking specifically about looking at candidate performance over the past 3 years, excluding last year, and that's mostly because the method for attaining grades last year was through inferred attainment and not through demonstrated attainment, and so statistically speaking that comparison may not be too valid. Sorry, that word was valid. Once faculties have completed their quality assurance and moderation, it then really comes over to me and the rest of the senior team to be looking at the whole school quality assurance, so actually taking the data and analysis that's coming from our departments and their faculties and having a look at it from a whole school perspective, and again trying to ensure that we have results that we are comfortable are reflective of the ability of our candidates. A difficult process, and one that we want to obviously spend as much time as we can within what is a very limited window of opportunity to be looking at these things. Ultimately, the kind of timelines that we're looking at is it's been a long-standing deadline. I'm hoping to have all provisional course awards from faculties by the end of this week. And then a lot of that analysis will then, that whole school analysis will be started by myself at the start of next week, and then comes on board some of the local authority input into our assessment and moderation, where later on next week, so on Thursday of next week, we'll be meeting with our Quality Improvement Officer, Rosie McCall, to discuss whole school results, and actually have also a bit of a review of our whole implementation of the ACM, the Alternative Certification Model that the SQA have asked us to employ this year. And then through all of that, we may identify issues or things that we want to look at further. And as I've mentioned there, a big part of what our faculty leads have to do is if the data that they have is not exactly in line with previous years, then they would provide a narrative to us as to why they believe that to be the case, because there could very well be very good reasons why the performance of candidates this year is different. For example, if we have a very strong cohort in a particular subject this year, then they may have performed considerably better than some of a previous cohort within a course may have done, and so they would want to make that case to make sure that through our processes we didn't be concerned by that difference from previous attainment. And ultimately we are working forward to the ultimate deadline of the 25th of June, which is the deadline for me to have transmitted all of the our provisional course awards to the SQA. I've actually noticed one of the questions just in the Q&A before I started was around how we're communicating the provisional course awards to families and candidates. So just to be aware that City Edinburgh Council have taken a centralised approach to issuing provisional course awards this year, and they have decided that they would like all 23 secondary schools to be issuing candidates with the provisional course awards on the same day, and this will be in the last week of term. Unfortunately, the official date for this has not been communicated to schools yet, but once I know that, I'll obviously let you know about that with as much advance notice as possible. It will be likely that that will be in the form of an emailed letter, and it would be my intention at the moment, unless I'm told otherwise, that would be communicated to all candidates, as in to individual candidates and individual families. So the contacts that we have on our CMIS system, it would go to the family contacts and to the candidate. And what that will be is a breakdown of the provisional course awards that we intend to be transmitting to the SQA in the form of a grade for each of the courses that that every learner is registered for and has been working towards. Also, the SQA, as they seem to have been doing recently, when they shared some information last week about the Appeals Service, also informed us that there were additional pieces of information that they would also like us to communicate, which we're now working to try and achieve, which is around specifically which pieces of evidence have been used to generate that provisional course award, and also what quality assurance or moderation processes have been gone through in helping to ensure that provisional course award is correct. Now, barring any administrative error, the SQA have stated that in direct reflection to last year, they have no intention at all to tinker, let's say, with provisional course awards when they are communicated to them just now. They are purely still being called provisional course awards because of this capacity that there may be some form of administrative error that may have to be fixed. But essentially, what we send to the SQA on the 25th is what is going to appear on the candidate's exam certificate that will be issued, their exam results. Maybe being a bit old-fashioned there, their exam result text or email that they receive on Tuesday the 10th of August. Now, as I highlighted there, we did receive significantly later than the SQA had promised, but we did receive last week, in the middle of last week, information about the Appeals Service, and again, a wee bit true to form of updates with from the SQA with another promise of more information at the end of this week. So what I can do is share with you at the moment what I believe to be the process for the Appeals Service for this year. Now, again, I'll try and run through this quickly as I possibly can. So there are some quite significant changes to the appeals process this year. First of that being that this is going to be initially a learner-led appeal system, which means that the young people, the candidates, have the ability to make the decision as to whether they want to appeal. It doesn't at the first stage have to come through the school. They have a free and open decision to make a request for an appeal, and they will do that through, we are being told, the SQA website. There will be a button, some form of portal that they will be able to go onto and enter in information, personal information, to then register that they would like to make an appeal. That service will be open from Friday the 25th of June. The appeals will be processed with the support of the schools from Tuesday the 10th of August. And so obviously before the end of the the school holidays, and learners will be supported by their school with information that they need to make the decisions and what's in their best interests. And once I have a bit more information and clarity around how the SQA expect that to happen during a holiday period, I will forward that on to you all. But it's important to understand that this is a student-led system, and that ourselves as an SQA presenting centre can't stop an appeal request. It is purely up to young people and indeed families to make that decision. Now, as in any other year, priority appeals will be available for learners who have offers to study at college or university and are maybe needing specific grades, and all other appeals will be processed after that. The grounds that are being made available to people for appeal this year, again, are slightly different. So on the slide in front of you there in bold at the top, I've detailed what the SQA have dictated are the grounds for appeal. So an appeal made against the academic judgment, so that would be the judgment that has been made by us as a school of the evidence of demonstrated attainment that the candidates have produced. That could be appealed. An appeal against an unresolved administrative error. So if you believe there was an administrative error and we as a school have not been able to resolve that, then you can appeal on those grounds, or you can appeal on the grounds of discrimination. And where you feel like there has been a breach of the Equality Act 2010, and if anybody's unaware of the Equality Act 2010, there are a number of protected characteristics, and it would be my understanding that a case would have to be made that we have been in breach of one of those protected characteristics, and therefore that would be your grounds to appeal. And then the final ground is that you would make an appeal on the grounds of discrimination on the basis that we have failed to provide agreed assessment arrangements. Now the next bullet point here is quite important, and very, very important for any candidates to understand this before making a judgment as to whether to appeal. I'll just read it out. This has come directly from SQA information. So a key principle of awarding of qualifications in any year is that the learner's grade is based on the evidence of their demonstrated attainment of the skills and knowledge of a course. And this is a central feature of this year's alternative certification model. Given this, an appeal of a result must also be based on the evidence of the learner's demonstrated attainment against the national standard. Therefore, the outcomes of an evidence-based appeal could be that a learner's grade could go up, go down, or stay the same. So essentially, the important bit of information is there that when you appeal, the SQA will be consulting with us to provide them the evidence, the hard evidence of demonstrated attainment that we hold, that the person appealing believes we may have made a poor judgment on. And it would then be sent to the SQA, who would then make a judgment of that evidence. It is conceivable that they could have judged that the marking or the all-over judgment of that evidence has been overly lenient rather than overly harsh. And so therefore, they could conceivably come to a conclusion that a candidate is downgraded and not potentially upgraded, as I'm sure that they would be appealing for. Now, just a few of the dates around this. Learners can register that they want to make a priority appeal. Remember, that's a priority appeal, so one which is directly reliant on entry to college, university, training or employment until Thursday the 12th of August, so still during the school summer holidays. However, if they miss that date, a school representative, which will likely be me, can submit a priority appeal for them until Monday the 16th of August. I do want to stress that is the first day of the new term, and that would be a deadline. So the timelines here are incredibly tight and not very kind to SQA coordinators. Also, if a learner does not need the priority service, then they can request the schools to submit an appeal for them, with the deadline for this being Friday the 27th of August. So if it's not a priority appeal, the candidate doesn't have to have made that appeal themselves by the 12th of August, but they could be having a discussion with the school about that and making sure that that appeal is in for them, ultimately overseen by me by Friday the 27th of August. Now, more details obviously of this, I've rattled through that fairly quickly, is available on the SQA website. I have to say there's actually a very, very useful page on there for learners, which is a bit of an interactive page with an interactive flow chart helping look at various different situations that a candidate may be in, and how that might change the process that they would take to go through that appeal. So that is all the information that I have for you for the time being with regards to SQA business. And I will hand over to, I'm not entirely sure. So I'm going to say Sarah, and then I'll see where it goes from there. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Bob. You'll be handing over now to Elliot Ambrose, who's going to speak about active schools, if that's okay with you, Elliot. Thanks.
That's great. Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, and thanks, Bob and Donald. So I'm going to share a presentation with you. I'm allegedly going to speak for 10 minutes. I will try not to waffle because I know there's a lot of information to take on board tonight, as there often is. So just bear with me a couple of moments while I load my presentation. Okay, so hopefully that should be displaying full screen now. That looks promising. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's nice to meet you, even though I can't see you, but hopefully you can see me or the screen, and hopefully I'll bump into you at some point. So my name's Elliot Ambrose. I'm the Active Schools Coordinator and the Community Sports Hub Officer for James Gillespie's cluster and the high school. So hopefully a brief 10-minute chat from me on these three things. So the first thing is the Active Schools new approach. As the council has had to, and many people have had to, we've had to adapt and change the way we do things. And I'm just going to give you headlines rather than boring you with a long spiel. The three headlines are that there's going to be a completely free to access programme, so no charge to participant, and that's mandated by our funding body, Sport Scotland. So they believe, and rightly so, that sport and physical activity should be free to all to access, because finance is often the first barrier. There'll be a greater emphasis on volunteer recruitment to try and support this, and there'll be more targeted projects during curricular time for those least active. This will primarily be in the cluster primaries. The first 2 points are the ones that really are going to focus in on tonight because they're the most salient for the high school. So finance, what's changing? Previously, we charged an annual membership fee of between £35 and £55 to cover all the things listed there. From September 2021, sessions, as I mentioned, will be free to all. Previously, the membership system allowed for those on free school meals or those in difficult financial circumstances to book on for free or have a reduction. So from September 2021, sessions will be free to all, as Active Schools cannot charge parents or participants. So parents, if we want to maintain a similar level of activity to what we've enjoyed in the past, parents will be encouraged to make a donation towards extracurricular sport at Gillespie's via parent pay. So there's no obligation to pay, it's not a cost, it's a donation. We do have a need for greater numbers of parent volunteers to help support the broad programme that we've had. A few numbers to put things in perspective for you. From the last full year before COVID, which was 18-19 academic year, we spent approximately 4,000 on, or just shy of 4,000 on coaching costs. And each year we spend between 2,000 and 3,000 on associated costs. So that's the little tick list that I showed a couple of slides ago, coaching, other than coaching, so equipment, travel, competition, NGB fees, all that stuff. So the projected annual cost of continuing to deliver the extracurricular programme we've enjoyed to date is going to be between £6,000 and £7,000. So donation-wise, on the donation system, if 200 parents donated £30 per year, so it's about a tenner a term, we should end up with about £6,000. So, what did we have before? Here's a few stats. I do love a stat, I won't lie. I also love a pie chart, although to be fair, this is more of a donut actually, or a polo. But I'll just give you a moment to absorb a few of those numbers. And I guess the first thing I really want to draw your attention to here is just the sheer diversity of our programme. As you can see, that wheel hasn't just got 2 or 3 colours on it. It's a really diverse programme that we've been able to offer in the past. We're really, really lucky to have great facilities, a swimming pool, outdoor facilities, indoor facilities. And these are the things we've been able to offer previously. The second thing I'd really love to draw your attention to is that the programme in the past has been 75% led by voluntary coaches. Now, a great deal of this is down to the PE staff who volunteer their time, as well as other teaching staff, to lead these sessions after school, to take kids to competitions and to organise things. And the reality is, we really do have a very well engaged PE department who do go over and above consistently to support the extracurricular programme. Also, we are a community sports hub club, which, to be honest, is probably another presentation for another day. But what that means is that being a community sports hub club, we have partnerships with all these different organisations, and this slide is a bit of a headache because I just whacked in all the, I didn't think I'd fit them all in. I just put all the logos in of all the different clubs that we work with, in addition to the parent and teacher volunteers from Gillespie staff and parent body. We have connections with all these community sports hub clubs. In fact, I was on a call with Edinburgh Hockey Club earlier today, who are coming on board as of September. And this is a real positive that we've got such a sporting community at James Gillespie's. We're a community sports hub, and it's these organisations that will support the programme from September. So the programme from September, and this is the headline, I suppose, we are aiming for a fuller return to what we had before. So the colourful wheel and those numbers that I showed you a couple of slides ago, that's what we're aiming for. We really want to reinstate that diversity, the quality and the quantity of what we're providing. But there are a few limiting factors, and I would ask for your patience and understanding as we work through these limiting factors in September. Primarily, they're around extra COVID procedures, which Donald and the admin staff at Gillespie's have been really supportive with, and they're supporting us with track and trace and with other things. Community sports hub clubs, their capacity may have changed, so they may not be able to offer as much as they did previously. And we will be a bit more dependent on donations and volunteers than previously. So we will be aiming to launch a programme in September, probably beginning the 1st or 2nd week of September, because it always takes a couple of weeks to nail down final details after term begins. I won't give you specific dates tonight, but I will just assure you, hopefully, that we are looking to reinstate a very similar programme to what we had before, drawing on the incredible community that we have as a community sports hub, and all these coaches from these clubs that are involved, and the PE staff who are continuing to volunteer into the new year. So hopefully I've summarised the finance and the September programme update for you. Brings me on to my last point, which is volunteering. Volunteering, it's brilliant. What you're seeing hopefully now on your slides, whether you like it or not, I'm afraid, is a picture of me and the basketball team I started a few years ago. That's me with the cheesy grin just under the basketball hoop when I still had a bit of hair. So this is a few years ago now, but the short story is I'm not just asking for parent volunteers. because I desperately need them to tick a box and to put a program on. I'm asking for parent volunteers because I, as a person, truly believe that volunteering is a worthwhile thing, a rewarding thing. And anyone who's played club sport or community sport for 5 minutes will know that volunteers are the lifeblood and the backbone of sport at ground level. And I'm sure there are some of you that are already involved voluntarily in your clubs. So for me, basketball gave me focus. It gave me a purpose when I was a bit of a troubled youth. I was a bit of a naughty boy at school, and it gave me a purpose and a direction in my life. And through volunteering, it actually led me into paid employment, to university, and on into the job I do today. And that's really what drives me, is to see kids like these get opportunities to achieve, get opportunities to grow and develop. And that is just the most brilliant part of volunteering. So I'm not telling you this to show off or to guilt trip you or anything like that. I'm just trying to share some of my journey in sport and share with you the importance of volunteering. If you would like to volunteer, because it is brilliant, there are 3 simple steps. Firstly, just get in touch. We can meet, have a chat. We can tick off the boring bits of paperwork that you have to do, but that are really important, but we can whiz through those. We can chat about what sport really motivates you, what you're passionate about. The second stage is receiving the ongoing training and support from myself and from the team. We're not just going to chuck you in the deep end and say, here's 50 kids, go and teach them how to play whatever. And then the third stage is just enjoying it, enjoying being a valuable part of the sport that you're passionate about. And we really do try and match opportunities to your availability. And if you're available and there's not a club on at that time, then we can try and switch them around. Really, we want to tailor volunteering around you. So hopefully I've given you a rough overview of the headline changes with active schools, the financial implications of those, and the opportunities to volunteer given the fantastic sporting community we have at James Gillespie's High School. So thank you very much for listening. And if you do have any questions at all, please post them in the chat, and I believe we will come to them at the end. Thank you very much.
Sorry, yeah, Jeff. I've just jumped in and put Jeff on it. Sorry, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry, Sarah. I just couldn't hear you in that last bit, but thanks for the introduction, which I assume you gave. Good evening, everybody. I'll share my screen in just a minute. Maybe against a normal protocol, but I just wanted to thank the person in the chat who said this sounds like an absolute nightmare for everybody, because it is, and it has been. And, you know, like I said in my email today to parents and pupils about the change of timetable, I can't wait for a new year that is fresh with no mistakes in it and back to some kind of normality, you know, for what we signed up to as teachers and educators. So can't wait for that, and hope the pupils can't wait for that as well. Donald's been very kind in allowing me to speak this evening, giving me an opportunity to kind of big up those, you know, some of the aspects of my work in the school, but I can guarantee that most of it you will find incredibly boring. So I'm just going to give you a very short whistle-stop tour of how we've come to this point, I guess, from course choice to timetable. I also just wanted to very quickly mention, I saw a couple of comments in the chat about concerns around course choice and pupils getting their grades, and will that affect their opportunity to change courses, etc. Absolutely not. As is always the case, when pupils get their results in previous years at the August certification, we have a massive amount of recoursing and changing of courses in the first few weeks of August. So please don't be concerned at this point about pupils being able to change or not change. In fact, we've had nothing but changes since March right through now, and that will continue, I'm sure, after the summer. Okay, I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Not much of a presentation really, but just to go through a couple of things. First of all, I just want to mention that some people, especially my partner, like to wind me up by saying, why don't you just use the same timetable, like just roll it on into next year? And what I need to go back to them about is to say, well, the numbers change. We have different numbers in every year group every year that moves on. The staffing changes. We have staffing, as Donald mentioned, going on maternity leave, people going on a career break. We have people coming in, coming out. And mainly the biggest issue is because we adopted a free choice system. We wanted to offer more flexibility and breadth and opportunity for pupils to study the subjects that interest them, that are going to move them forward in the pathway that they have chosen. So we have a huge variety and breadth of courses in the school. Certainly in the time that I've been, in fact, even less, probably about half the time that I've been in the school, taking a list, we've added things like engineering science, environmental science, lab skills, politics, mental health and well-being, and access to Duke of Edinburgh course, leadership, Mandarin, Prince's Trust, Achieve program, which is a life skills program, psychology, philosophy, games development, cybersecurity. We now are able to run advanced higher computing, which we weren't able to run in the past, as well as all our enhanced subjects through the GME provision. So a huge wealth and breadth of subjects. I happened to check one of the other schools in Scotland that is huge, possibly the biggest secondary school in Scotland, and I would say that we offer as much, if not more, breadth of choice to our pupils, and that's something I'm really proud of, and that I mentioned in one of or Donald put in his Friday update recently. The satisfaction rate for getting the pupils their choices is extremely high. So definitely very proud of that. So we had our course choice information that went out in the new booklet that was devised by the students from the Edinburgh College of Art back in November, December, input from Skills Development Scotland and pupil support, and all of that led to a course choice. And you see on your screen sort of the software I use to input the course choices for the pupils. Normally we would have a full information evening, and unfortunately this year we weren't able to do that, but faculties were able to present to students online through sort of virtual Teams meetings and give them a little bit more information ahead of their initial course choice. That information is collated, put together, but was massively interrupted this year by, as you know, the March return. I think it was the 15th of March that we came back and had to adapt our structure and timetable to get pupils back into school on a part-time basis. And so, of course, this process of setting the timetable for the coming session was a little bit delayed. But we move on to looking at data. So, for example, again on your screen, this is the boring bit, but won't spend much time on it. But you can see this sort of clash table. So I can see how many people have taken, for example, advanced higher maths and advanced higher biology. I've got 8 students. Or for example, I think I was looking at art, A-level art against advanced higher history, where there isn't a clash, in fact, I think at all here. So, that's modern studies, but A-level art and advanced higher history. So there's an example, 0 clashes. And from all this kind of information that's on your screen, I would then, need to move that over, be able to place things into columns. So for example, again, A-level art here, don't mind the numbers, and advanced higher history appear in the same column, which is the same times, because each column represents times in the week, because there were no clashes or very few clashes between pupils requesting A-level art and pupils requesting advanced higher history. And so it goes across all the rest of the subjects in order to then form the columns where the subjects will lie. This happens not only for the seniors, but then we go and do the same for the juniors, do their clash table, and then see where the columns best fit. We had a recent or late addition in the last month or two of music technology. So for example, you can see how I added music technology in a few different columns to see where it would best fit and where most pupils could take that subject. It ended up being in this block column F against these other subjects. You'll see, as another example, RMPS. For this situation, religious, moral, and philosophical studies. I originally had it in block E, but because of a staffing issue, I've had to move it to block D, so that way the teacher could take all of those lessons. Unfortunately, that means there's one student who I'm unable to put into that course, and so we obviously then speak with them and try to find an alternative for them, or if indeed they want to take RMPS and change to something else. And so it goes, and so it goes. So I will close that down. We then move to placing things onto the timetable, starting with the seniors, and then come up with this. So I don't know if you can see that. Maybe Elliot can give me a thumbs up because I can see him on my screen. But if you can see on your screen, this should be the table or the blocking for the entire.
We're just seeing the menu.
You're just seeing the.
We're just seeing the menu.
The menu. Okay. I'm not sure what it is actually that you're seeing, but on my screen I've got the full kind of blocking of the timetable. That doesn't matter if you see it or don't see it. So in order to bring this together, all of the columns and the times and the subjects, there's lots of things to consider. It's not just the rooming. I know that there's a lot of chat about rooming and accommodation, and that just factors into it, partially. Here, I'll take this off if you can't see it all. There we go. That just is part of the puzzle. We've got staff specialisms that we have to consider, staff who are on flexible working arrangements, because we do work hard to support the work-life balance of our staff where there is need or where there's a request. And we've got several dozen members of staff who are on a part-time or flexible working arrangement that we try to work around the timetable. We work to fit the timetable against the growing role that Mr. McDonald mentioned, while maintaining that breadth of choice. We have requests from teachers to carry their S3 into S4. They want to stay with their classes sometimes where possible. We've got teachers asking for certain subjects at certain times of the day. Can I have my particular higher class at this time, or my S1s at this time? So for example, we've got the Duke of Edinburgh, the Access to Duke of Edinburgh course, specifically wanted a timetable that for afternoons or the end of the day to allow for them to be able to either leave early for expeditions or get involved in work in the community. So the timing was important to consider when we could put them. The spread across the week. Don't want to have all your periods of English in one day. We want to spread them across the week, but also have them stay with the same teacher wherever possible, trying to avoid split classes and split teachers. We want to give the full entitlement of PE, PSE, RME, coordinate the travel column for college and neighborhood school options. So there's lots of factors that bring us to the timetable that we have and that pupils will get on Monday. So as per the email that was sent out earlier today to pupils and to parents and carers, that will be Monday. Pupils should arrive following their regular timetable as they have for the year. But when we get to period 4, just before lunch, they will go to their key adult, their registration class, in their normal location with their key adult teachers, where the new timetable will be distributed, and that new timetable will start the following morning on Tuesday the 15th. So I suppose just to say at that point, I'll send out more information on the procedures. I think I mentioned this in the email about when there are issues or conflicts or difficulties with the timetables, but I suppose just ask you to reassure everybody, your children, and to reassure yourselves, don't panic if there is something incorrect or an error or an omission or a course that needs to be changed. There's plenty of time for us to get things sorted. We work very hard to try and provide the opportunity for pupils to study what they want to study and what will move them forward. It just takes a bit of time, as you can imagine. It's quite a puzzle. I think I'll stop at that. Thank you very much. I'll pass it back to Sarah, I believe.
Sarah, I don't know, we can't see you and I can't make you live yet. So, Donald, I wonder if I could just pass over to you and you can maybe pick up on, start looking at some questions.
Thanks, Graham. I'm happy to do that. And what I intend to do then, I notice that there are 54 published questions and some of these have been liked many times. There is a facility which I discovered this evening which allows me to order them by the most liked. So what I propose to do is to work my way through these and just comment. Now, I'm not sure if the questions as they stand are visible to those who are viewing. So if they are, and I'm repeating them unnecessarily, apologies. First of all, thanks to Jeff Warden, Bob and Elliot for coming along this evening to present and share. You can see some of the work that goes on behind the scenes, and they're all complex, time-consuming, but they're all really, really important that we get it right as a school. I echo the question about it being an absolute nightmare. It has been challenging, without a doubt. I'm going to steer away from using words like nightmare. I'm going to try and stay positive, and you'll understand if I do that. Privately, it has been really, really challenging, and yeah. The question then about, is James Gillespie's High School going to contest the fact that the public schools, fee-paying schools, are allowing their pupils to resit? The simple answer is no. I'm not in a position to do that. What I will do is I will do my level best working with Bob as our SQA coordinator, that the integrity of the system that we are operating is secure, and we can hold our hands up and say that we applied the criteria robustly, and it will stand up to scrutiny. I have to take responsibility for that, and we will do that. What other schools choose to do, or other local authorities choose to do, that is up to them to meet the quality assurance procedures that will be in place and make sure that they meet them. So I have responsibility for James Gillespie's High School, and that will be the area I have responsibility for. Privately, I may have other views about other practices, but that's for another forum. A question then about, and this has been a recurring question, about the learning for the S4s and also the S5s over the past 2 weeks. Can I say at the outset that this is not how I would have wanted it to have been? Traditionally, if I can call it that, we would have exam leave extending usually from the beginning of May, and the new timetable would change. We change the new timetable usually within the first week, 8 days or so of June. That's basically been the pattern, the way of operation for as many years as I can remember. This year it's all changed, and there were various reasons for it. The council decided that there would be no exam leave whatsoever, other than we did make a special case for exam leave in order for us to run the exams. And there were several days, as intimated through our communication from Bob Shanklin, to which days did count as exam leave. There were days where we just didn't have sufficient classroom space to run the exams and the additional arrangements, for example, that we needed. So there were 3 or 4 of these. But the other days when pupils did not have an exam, they were expected to be in. I appreciate that's brought a bit of frustration, a bit of stress to youngsters when, they really needed, particularly youngsters who had finished their exams, they needed to be at home chilling, and then of course the better weather came and there was a temptation to be outside. I would have preferred to have had more exam leave. I know colleagues, head teacher colleagues and teachers across the city would disagree with that. They would feel that having had lengthy lockdown with pupils being at home a lot, that they needed to be in school far, far more. So it was a political decision that was taken, and we were bound by it. In truth, it wasn't, possibly I'm reading the comments, that it wasn't necessarily the greatest positive educational experience, and nor was it possible to make it so. We had teachers who were involved in marking, assessing, moderating, doing all that work, and they will have a handful of youngsters in front of them. So trying to offer a meaningful set of lessons was going to prove challenging in that, and I would question its validity. So apologies if that wasn't quite as positive as you would want it to be, and I hope that we're not in that situation again. There is other work with hindsight that perhaps we could have undertaken. There's comments about using the iPads, but we know that not all the youngsters collected their iPads. So it was a bit of I'm going to use a Gaelic word, a búrach. It was an impossible situation that we were in. We can't grant exam leave. A number of youngsters chose to take exam leave, and of course that compounded the difficulty in making lessons meaningful. So we're going to draw a line under it and move on. We will be changing timetable from next Tuesday, as we mentioned, when we can pull things together and make a much more structured and meaningful start to going forward. There is a question about assessment results, and I think Bob Shanklin has covered that in terms of how these assessment results will be shared. So I'm not going to go over that. And also Bob Shanklin mentioned when the dates, the release of these, they will be towards the end of the last week. The specific date is still to be decided on by the council. And I can see Bob on screen, so Bob, let me know if I've got that right. So Bob, is going to be a thumbs up. So that specific date, it will be towards the last week, the end of the last week. So I would guess it will be either the 23rd, 24th, or the 25th. And that's a council decision as to when to release that. There's a question, again, quite a number of questions about SQA, as one would anticipate. A question specifically about high stakes scenarios. As a direct quote from the SQA website, assessment opportunity should not be one-off high stakes scenarios and should accommodate as far as possible the maximum opportunity for learners to perform well. What I would say on that is that it's quite frustrating for us as a school. Often we would see that, and then often what was being shared with the lead teachers and teachers could be a variance with that. And there is a conflict in terms of the information that we've received. The subjects specifically mentioned there, maths, well, physics, biology, and chemistry, they were really absolutely 100% clear that something that replicated the type of exam that would have been used in previous years was the most robust, and it was the one that had the highest predictive value, and that's what we were being steered towards, regardless, and that's a variance with what's on the SQA website. So apologise for that conflict. We went with basically what was being shared directly with our teaching staff and what they were, and some of whom are working with the SQA, and that's an area where I think there has been some confusion and uncertainty this year. Bob, I don't know if we want to say anything further on that, whether you want to come in. You don't have to. I mean, I appreciate that you've covered this. Anything further you want to say, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I could talk about the science situation till the cows come home. It's been one that has probably caused the greatest amount of annoyance and frustration for us. Excuse me. As a school, as I know it has done nationally. The only thing that I would add really to what you've said, Donald, which is 100% correct, is that yeah, the disparity between what is being shared by the SQA to science teachers about the way in which the assessments should be organised definitely contrasts and contradicts with the statements which are coming out in a more general sense about the assessments that students should be setting. We were also advised by the science leads that if we wanted to split assessments up, I know there was a mention of it being a 2.5-hour exam, that if we were to split assessments up, then we would also have to immediately raise the cut-off scores because of making the assessments easier in the view of the people that are in charge at the SQA of running these science qualifications, which in my view would be a big risk to then do that and put candidates at even greater risk of not potentially getting the marks that they deserve. So yeah, science has been a very difficult situation to manage this year, and I can only reflect what Donald said, is that we've made the decisions based on the information that we had at the time and made those decisions with the best interest of the students at heart.
Thanks, Bob. Again, I'm seeing questions about the teaching over the last 2 weeks and how that's been not as structured as we would like it to have been. And we know that youngsters were exhausted at the end of a grueling period. We chose to do assessments in the last couple of weeks in May. And at the end of all that, and all that had been before, students would be exhausted and they would benefit from time off. And a number chose to take that time off. And thank you to parents who have informed us and kept us up to speed. There are other youngsters who, for example, are involved in languages, so doing speaking assessments, and that is ongoing, and there's some more of these to happen in the remaining days. Moving on with me to a slightly different theme, a question about iPads. Why has the council decided to go with iPads and Microsoft Office? We do have a dedicated IT team with the council, and it was their decision who, in turn, they advise councillors who make the decisions on such matters. Let's talk about more competitive products being available, etc., and Microsoft Office and iPads perhaps not being quite as compatible. And there are cheaper options, for example, Chromebooks. The decision was made to go with iPads, and they are the ones that will be used. And that position is a political one that's made by councillors. A question about now 5 and higher kids get the opportunity to resit certain assessments, as has been done in other schools. I just say that what happens in other schools has no bearing on what we do, because it's been quite a different journey to where we are. Some schools, for example, had they had what we call prelim exams, some before Christmas, so they may have been able to bank evidence from that. In some schools, they had more pupils back than we had. We had a quarter of the pupils back at a time, just in the 3 weeks before Easter. Some schools had all the pupils back in the 3 weeks before Easter. So it was all quite different. So naturally, there's going to be some variation in terms of how we do that. We have been talking about reassessing some elements across subjects, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all approach across all of our subjects. In some subjects, in order to make it valid, I understand that it would need a full 3-hour assessment. In others, it may be possible to have a 20-minute reassessment of an element. But those discussions are ongoing, and we will do whatever we can do to ensure that youngsters are able to fulfil their potential. Discussions around that are ongoing, and we have got time between now and the deadline to do some checking to see where youngsters have not performed quite as well as we might have hoped. But that analysis is ongoing. Question then about active schools. Active schools is an excellent free opportunity for all, I would agree, and I'd like to support this by giving a minimum of £30. Seems very cheap for what is being provided. I would concur with that, thanks to all the volunteers. The council position on active schools, whilst Active Schools Scotland has said that, their underpinning philosophy is that access to sports is free at the point of contact. There is, and I watched the council meeting on this last weekend, the council position is that schools, with the support of parent councils, can augment this programme by parents donating financially in order that we can maintain the breadth of sports that we had. And as Elliot eloquently shared earlier, we do need those donations. And if we have 200 parents sharing or donating £30, then we would have the £6,000 or so that would allow us to maintain the breadth of programme we had previously. It's really important for me, in keeping with council and government priorities, that those who cannot afford to be able to access sport, that they are able to do that. We do that by others who are able to, by donating a little bit more. And whether that be sport, or those who have provided a free ticket for the prom, or various other things. And of course, we can also, there's fundraising that happens through the year. And to that end, I'm grateful to Parent Council who raises money, and also to the James Gillespie's Trust, who also raise money. And they are the body through which some very healthy bequests have been channeled or are managed towards supporting the school. So there are various means of it, but what's really important is that the principle that our talented young people who perhaps are not able to afford sport, that they have access to it. I think that's really, really important in a state school that is inclusive, that we can do that. And that means, I hope, that those who are able to afford more than £30 or £40 will donate that. So in fact, I'm hoping that we will expand on the programme from 2 years ago rather than just maintaining it. So I always want to be ambitious and raise the bar higher, and we'll do that. So that will be up and running by September is our aim. And to that end, we will support as a school in terms of assisting with the finances for the programme and also undertaking the contact tracing, which we've now developed expertise and knowledge of. So it takes the pressure off parents or coaches. So if you're in the audience tonight and you're looking to help, please get in touch. I would suggest initially with Elliot. Rest assured that some of the bureaucracy that often is so off-putting around running such clubs, that we will support that as a school. We've got admin support in the school for help with the finances, and we will undertake contact tracing. I'm going to be directly involved in that, and I'm happy to do that to ensure that our programme is as healthy and as diverse as it is. Moving through, if I can pick up one or two other themes that perhaps haven't been covered. A number of questions about SQA. We will come back and I'll respond to these and answer them more fully. Questions about iPads. And this point, Sarah, if there's anything that you've picked up, Sarah, that you particularly want me to comment, or any member of the panel, I'd be happy to do that.
Donald, sorry for the technical difficulties. I haven't actually been able to see the questions until they've been emailed to me, so I'm just looking at them just now. The technology is working against me this evening. There was one question I wondered if it's worth commenting on about forecasting for the capacity needed at the school over the next 5 to 10 years in light of rising roles and what kind of classroom space would be available, because I know that's obviously something we've touched on in most of the meetings that we've had for the Parent Council over the last few months, and the Darach arrangements which are coming on stream next spring, and the interim arrangements at Children First. I don't know if it's worth giving up, a couple of sentences on the plans for that.
Thanks, Sarah. First of all, in terms of projections, it seems to be one of the areas that is very, very difficult for councils to do. Those who have been in the school for a while know that when the new school opened in 2016, was when the campus was completed, we were full at that point, and the same has happened with Boroughmuir and more recently Queensferry. The school tends to be full or beyond capacity at the point of opening. Now, I've no doubt that we have good people who are involved in the projections and the capacity planning, but it's one that frustratingly isn't as accurate as we would like it to be. And Gillespie's, we are certainly feeling the impact of that. And as earlier I mentioned, that rising roles provides opportunity. I do prefer to see things as half full. I do appreciate that in our context, where we have a shortage of classroom, that is not quite the opportunity perhaps I'd portrayed it. So I apologise if you think I'm being overly positive around that. In normal circumstances, then, when you have the additional accommodation, etc., of course, then it's an opportunity. You bring in new staff and you can develop the curriculum. In our context, where we have a shortage of classroom, it is rather challenging. As far as Darach is concerned, first of all, the refurbishment of Darach was delayed by a year because of COVID. We are assured that it's on track and it will be ready for the spring of 2022. I'll be resistant to moving to Darach before June and possibly August of 2022, which does allow for a bit of slippage. I know from having been involved in several projects of that nature over the years that invariably there can be slippage, but I think it's really important that they deliver on time. I would want it to be ready for April so that we can go in, we can do all the snagging, all the testing. It may well be a centre for exams next year, if we are having exams next year. I appreciate that's a different topic. In terms of the advanced higher arrangements for next year, it is our intention to accommodate as many of the advanced higher classes as possible on the existing campus. We will use Children First where we can't manage them on the existing campus. We will be using the Children First building, and arrangements around that are progressing well and quickly. The IT that is needed for us to run additional classes there is being planned and implemented, and that will be completed over the summer. So the Children First building will not be ready for us to take occupancy off, if you like. The areas that we have access to won't be ready till August. So throughout the month of June, when we don't, of course, have a first year in the building, there is some capacity in the existing campus for us to absorb the classes. It will be our intention then to use the space that we have, the additional space, we'll use it flexibly. We have had access to the building and we've seen what it's like. And Laura Stewart, who's the colleague who's leading on this, reports back that it's a lovely building. It's been well appointed, and I think will serve us well. But the preparations in terms of finalising it are ongoing. In terms of the future and 10-year planning, I think it's important that this is an area that is raised continually by the parents, and that we ask, we remind those who work for the council and advise them that it's important that we get this right. We know, for example, what's happening in terms of P1, P2, P3, so we can reasonably predict, assuming there are no changes to legislation around occupancy of the buildings, no changes to catchment areas, we know how many will be in catchment, roughly. We can predict that in 7 years' time. What we don't know is what potential impacts other larger impacts could have. For example, we don't know what, for example, were independence to come, what impact that would have on an influx or moving out of Edinburgh. We don't know. There are other big factors there. We don't know, for example, what impact selling off the former Sick Children's Hospital will have, what accommodation that will be turned into. I would anticipate that there will be families with school-aged children in their catchment who will add to it. Broadly speaking, I think that the estimates that we have of role growth, probably we should be adding 10% onto that, would be my experience over the years. And I think it's something that, as a parent council, that we should continually be raising with our elected officials, so that we avoid the situation that we're currently in, which is unnerving for parents, probably unfair on the children, because they're not getting the access to the facilities that they should, but it is stressful for staff and trying to keep everybody happy and do our best. Ideally, we'd want to have adequate accommodation, well planned, to cater for all our pupils. We don't have that. We are where we are, but we will do our absolute level best to ensure that we maintain our full educational standards for all. And we're just waiting for Sarah to unmute. I think that's you unmute.
Oh, thank you. It's finally unmuted. Yes, I'm having lots of technological problems at this end. Unless any of the other presenters ask questions that they would particularly like to pick up on at the moment. No. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for answering the questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. My apologies for my failure to come in when I should and things like that. The technology is working against me this evening, as I've said. I'd like to thank Bob, Jeff and Donald for their updates, and also a particular thank you to Elliot for coming to speak to us about active schools. I understand that it's the first time that he has attended a parent council meeting, so that I hope that it has been an enjoyable and useful experience for him. And I'd like to also thank all the parents who have made comments in the Q&A supporting the approach and offering to make donations. That's very welcome. This is really going to be a joint effort to make sure this all works after the summer, so all support, financial, moral and in terms of volunteering is very welcome. I know I say this every meeting, but it remains true that we are very grateful that over a year of significant disruption and dislocation that we are able to hear regularly direct from school staff about what is happening at the school, and we are very grateful for you coming along on all the evenings that you have come. As has been mentioned a number of times, this is the last Parent Council meeting for 2020-2021, and we hope you all have a safe and enjoyable summer, and that you will join us again after the holidays. And before we leave, I think Donald would like to say something, or is he just waving at me?
Thanks, Sarah. Can I also just marking, as it's the last Parent Council meeting of the year, to thank Parent Council members for your support through the year. It has been an extraordinary year, but I think we wouldn't be as well informed, we wouldn't be as in touch with the parents and as responsive to the views and the various perspectives were it not for you. So huge thanks on behalf of our school staff to you and for the work that you do in working with us, supporting us, helping us, and trying to facilitate us making the best informed decisions on behalf of the pupils who, at the end of the day, they're the ones that actually matter, and providing for them. So thank you.
Well, I think that's the end of the meeting then. Thanks, good night. Thank you.